Good evening, Facebook. My name is Chuck Fagan, and this is a special presentation of the Better Savannah Facebook page. This evening, we'll have a very special debate for the Democratic nomination for the chairman of the Chatham County Commission. This race is a pivotal race as the current incumbent is term limited, although he is seeking other office. Tonight, we'll be asking specific questions to get the best answers from both of these candidates to determine who will be the best nominee to take on the Republican in the general election. This event will be moderated by myself, Chuck Fagan, and John McMasters, founder and chairman of Better Savannah. By alphabetical order, we'll let our candidates introduce themselves, beginning right now with Commissioner Chester Ellis from the 8th District.
Good evening, and thank you for inviting me to be a part of the debate today, or the spirited conversation today. My name is Chester Ellis, and I want to serve you as your next chairman of the Chatham County Commission. It is time for us to take action. Together, we can get this done. I have 30 years of leadership experience and executive management experience as a career educator, public servant, proud father, lifelong citizen, pastor here in Chatham County. I have stood on the forefront of our community. Leadership is in my DNA. Through my service and successful work with others, my peers have confidently elected me as the current vice chair of the board. I have worked with all 8 districts and will continue working to create a vibrant economy as your chairman. Due to COVID-19, our economy will need recovering. We will be at a great challenge for us to go forward. It's time to place people over politics. As chairman, I will use smart business growth to diversify our business sector, bringing in industries such as biometric, technology, pharmaceutical, and film industry jobs. I will encourage local, small, and minority and women-owned businesses to be a part of this growth. On day one, I am ready to lead with transparency, accountability, and strong leadership. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Ellis. For our second introduction, we will go to Commissioner Jay Jones from the 6th District.
Fellas, first I want to go ahead and give y'all kudos and appreciations for putting this platform together. It is very much needed as far as what's going on in our time frame and our age with COVID-19 preventing us from having full latitude out there in our community. So I give blessings, and I thank y'all for putting this thing together. As far as if you didn't know who I am, I'm going to let you know who I am. I'm James Cornelius Jones is my official government name, but most people call me Jay. And I put it out there, Chuck. I ain't got no problem putting it out there. It's a lot of people who do know my middle name. And I'm running to be your next chairman here in Chatham County. The reason why I decided to seek office is because sitting on the county commission the last 3 years, I saw that there is a disconnect as far as what we could be doing and what we should be doing. Part of the reason why I said I was going to step forward is because it did me no justice to sit in the seat again for another 4 years and be mute or be just a representative up there on the board. I feel I have the latitude, I feel I have the education, I feel I have the experience and the knowledge to move this county forward into a different generation. I came with a simple platform, simple as ABC. I wanted to make it simple, easy, so I can explain it, so people can share it with other people and explain it. And as A1 Chatham County Services, sometimes I say A1 Services, but A1 Chatham County Services. What that means is making sure we provide the best service we possibly can in our community, making sure that we're reaching not just those who have access to government, but those who don't have access to government, and making it easy, plain, and simple for all us across the county to be able to work together in one unison form. And also making sure that the services provided from all the municipalities, hey, we can have a conversation and consolidate some of this stuff so we can cut down on some of the money that we're actually spending in our environment. Number 2 thing was business sense. Business sense is very simple, very plain. I think a lot of disconnect tied to the 30+ years of poverty is tied to because we're just not making sure we're promoting businesses in our community that can be effective, they can be thought-provoking, and they can be a cross-cutting edge when it comes to the whole community itself. And so making sure we have the opportunity of businesses, not just to minorities, but to women, to all those individuals in our community, to be able to have hope, to be able to go ahead and say, hey, I want to start a business. When I came back, the first thing I wanted to do, I wanted to start a business. And guess what? I ran into all kinds of roadblocks. We need to remove roadblocks and make it easy for people to go ahead and start businesses in our community. And so businesses for everybody was the second piece of the platform. And the last piece of the platform was community community inclusion. And what that means is when I ride around town, I go to Garden City, I go to Port Wentworth, I go to Port Pooler, and I go all these other places. And I love Savannah dearly. I love Savannah dearly. But there's no connectivity as far as community inclusion in those environments. And then I'm gonna say a second point. I think that when I also talk about community inclusion, making sure minorities are at the table, whether they're women, whether they're Black, white, Hispanic, or whatever, making sure everybody has an opportunity to be a part of this community is very great. We did a minority study about 4 or 5 years ago, and we did nothing with it from that point. And that just shows us that we're really not trying to make sure the narrative is clear. You're not going to fix 30 years of poverty until you make sure you're including everybody. So with that being said, I'm ready to answer any questions brought before me, have any kind of conversation that's needed, because this is the time frame where we let the people out there understand what we're here for. And so I'm gonna turn it back over to y'all fellas. Thank you for giving me that little quick short introduction. But
absolutely. Thank you for that introduction, Commissioner Jones. We will go to our questions. I'm gonna ship it over to you, John, for the first question here. I think the first 2 questions here, we can do 2-minute responses with 60-second rebuttals. Go ahead, John.
Okay, gentlemen. The recent city election was historic, as voters basically did not return any incumbents. What's your takeaway from this dramatic outcome, particularly looking at your election this year? Commissioner Ellis, you want to take that first?
Well, when I look at the city election, the will of the people spoke, and what I thought that ran the city election was that the people felt disconnected from the previous administration. Serving as a community president, I know that we sat at the table with the past officers or the past elected officials, and we talked to them about things that we would like to see happen in our neighborhood. We were heard, but we weren't listened to. And so therefore we felt the disconnect. So I know that was the problem here in the 8th district, or in the 1st district, I should say, that we serve in.
Great. Commissioner Jones, same question.
I worked hand in hand with most of those individuals. I made sure that I worked with Alicia Blakely, and I'm gonna call the names out. They know I have no problem there. I worked with Keisha Carter. I worked with Burnett Lanier. I worked with them because my thing was, I saw what we had in government for the last 4 years wasn't really working for all of Savannah, Georgia, and we needed a change. And I also understood that this is a non-splosh year, which I know we're going to talk about that later on, a non-splosh term, I should say. I know we're going to talk about that later on. So it's not as juicy of an election as the normal elections would be. But I think that what's happening in city government right now is just what we need to happen. It's a shakeup. It's a turn of events. And I think what's going to happen eventually is those 9 people will get together and they will start to work together as far as moving this narrative forward. And I'm glad to see that all the shakeup, because if they came in there all agreeing, I would be more upset than anything, because I would think we absolutely did nothing possible. And so, yes, I'm not a community leader, because in my side of town, we don't have those kind of neighborhood associations, everything like that. But I am a person who deals with my community. I am a person who is very in tune to what's going on the south side of Chatham County. And so I am glad to see the mix up, and I'm glad to see what's going on as far as the new energy, the new wave that's happening in our community.
Great, thank you.
Thank you for that answer, Commissioner Jones. I want to stick with you here for the first response to this next question. The county chairman and the mayor of Savannah are limited to 2 terms. Almost every city council candidate last year campaigned on bringing about term limits for all of the aldermen. In our interviews so far this year, many candidates for county commission at the district level have also indicated a willingness to support term limits for the county commission district representatives. Will you, as chairman of the county commission, support term limits for the rest of the commission besides just the chairman?
I definitely, I believe in term limits because I think when you get in the office too long, you get stale. My only quorum to term limits is this though. For us to be able to collect a pension, we have to do at least 10 years. So if it's a term limit time, you would have to do it in a 3-year time, a 3-term time limit, or we would have to make an adjustment to the, I guess for the pension plan where it can be 8 years, and that would affect all employees. So there's a kind of conversation we need to have. I have no quorum with it. I believe that term limits should be in play. I'm running for county chair because I don't think that I need to run in my seat again because I think I'm outgrowing my position. And I think as politicians, when you outgrow something, you should not sit in a seat and hold it hostage because you keep your community from growing. I think you should always take a time if you're a politician to constantly grow, mature, do other things, and be reinvented because the only way you can change what's going on in our world is if you're considered a change agent that's willing to change the system. So my only 2 quorums with it would be, of course, term limits. It would have to be 3 terms if we stuck with the same pension plan. If not, then we would have to make an adjustment as far as the pension plan being reduced from 10 to 8 years.
Thank you for that response, Commissioner Jones. Commissioner Ellis, would you like to offer a rebuttal here?
The only rebuttal I would say, Chuck, is that when we talk about term limits, I want to leave it to the people. All right. I would rather take to the people that question about all the commissioners being on term limits. Let's do the data. Let's get what the people say, because as it says, you represent the people. And one thing I do know is that when you don't represent them in a fair and equal manner, they'll vote you out. And so when we talk about term limits, it's on the chair as term limits, but I would like to see what the people are saying, what the communities are saying about term limits.
Thank you. Thank you for that response to both of you. John, I want you to ask the next question here. I think these next 2 questions are pretty important. So let's go ahead with 3-minute responses and 90-second rebuttals here. John?
Okay, very good. Prior to the Corona-19 virus, Chatham County over the last decade has experienced significant growth and business expansion. Yet Chatham County's poverty rate is currently 17.3%, and nationally, county poverty rates average 13%. Excuse me. My question is, if we've had over a decade of very significant growth, ports, SCAD, housing, etc., why has Chatham County's poverty rate not dropped significantly? Commissioner Ellis, you want to start with that?
Sure. I think that the problem has been there has been no planning, right? For the last, I need to say for the last 8 years, all right, 4 years before I was on the commission and 4 years after I was on the commission, I worked with the commissioners to establish the blueprint. All right, I'm one of the original authors of the blueprint, and now the blueprint needs a master plan. We elected folks in the past who were just about their particular district, and that did not include become inclusive of people who were in the poverty area. So when we look at being inclusive rather than exclusive, all right, we look at what the poverty rate, and we just happen to be that Chatham County is at 17.3% and the nation is at 13.1%. But then we need to dig deeper into that and to look at who it is and by what age group, by what demographics, by what gender. And when we look at it, what we'll find that there are 2 things that we need to help us get out of the poverty hole that we have been in for the last 30 or 40 years. One is economics, the other is education. Those things need to come to the forefront of what we're doing. If we train our people to be better stewards of their finance, if we train our people that they can get better jobs, that we can lift up the poverty rate that we have here. But it's going to take education, and then it's going to take wholesome attitude from everybody. I'm talking about business, I'm talking about faith-based, I'm talking about just everyone has to tackle the poverty issue together.
Okay. Thank you. Jay?
Can you restate the question, John?
Sure. Basically, over the last decade or even longer, Jay, we've seen, this is all pre-COVID, mind you, rapid expansion with new residents moving in, the Savannah College of Art and Design growing its student body, the port container growth, the explosion in the tourism industry downtown. I mean, we're really, in the last decade and a half, things have boomed in this town. But the poverty rate, and this is also true for the city of Savannah, but since we're county guys and we're talking about county, I looked at the county poverty numbers, and you really haven't seen a decline. Granted, you haven't seen an increase, but we all know that a tremendous amount of prosperity and wealth happened in the last decade and a half. But the question, Jay, is why are we flatlined at a 17+% poverty when most counties across America, if you average, are 13? So,
John, to answer your question is simple, man. You know, I'm not going here. I know this is a debate, and I'm not going to go into debate mode right now. But John, we know where poverty exists in Chatham County. We know. I can take you right now, John, get in my car, and I can take you where poverty exists in Chatham County. The problem is, John, we don't face it head on. Nobody in leadership has said we need to take poverty as an initiative that we need to drive to reduce it down, whether 1%, 2%, 3%, 4%. What we have not done is we have not insulated those organizations who are poverty-driven organizations whose job and task is to reduce the poverty rate and not invested them countywide. And because of these situations, John, that's the reason why poverty hasn't moved. But we don't have no problem supporting CETA, the Chamber, and all these other organizations and say, yeah, we need to create jobs and jobs and jobs and jobs. But then guess what? And we give a false rate when it comes to education. But guess what? We're really not digging down deep into what we need to do to reduce poverty, John. John, I can take you right now. Chuck, I can take you right now. Commissioner Ellis, if you want to ride, he can ride too. I can tell you where the poverty issues at right now in our community. And it's been plagued for 30+ years, John. So when we played this game, like we don't know where poverty was existing and poverty was played at, then John, we playing the game, brother. I don't have as much poverty on my side of town as the other side of town. And I can say that wholeheartedly. And I can show you where factual information says that. John, we got to stop dressing up poverty and putting on good clothes and only talking about it when we need money to come down here to fund it. We need to really dress up poverty levels in our community. And most of our poverty lies in the city limits of Savannah.
agreed.
And we got to understand it. That's the true nature of it. But until we grab the bull by the horns and talk about our issues, we're going to get nowhere at all, John.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Jones. Commissioner Ellis, I want to direct this next question to you also on the topic of growth. In the last 40 years, growth has taken on a mostly positive connotation, but many urban planners, economists, and sociologists are rethinking growth. Today, these experts are cautioning that growth can be an impediment to the quality of life and actually cause existing residents to pay higher property taxes. What is your view on growth in Chatham County over the next decade, and what policies and practices should Chatham County adopt to guide this growth forward?
Chuck, when you look at
Chester Ellis.
Okay.
Chuck, when you look at the growth of Chatham County, here's what we need to know. Economists are telling us that Chatham County in the next 5 or 7 years will be above 300,000, all right? But along with growth, we need to bring in the education part, and we also need to bring in the economics of where it exists, all right? It's true that that certain areas of Chatham County is growing in leaps and bounds, especially the Pooler area. All right. But now, when you look at females that are 25 to 34 years old, all right, they are below the poverty line. They lead the nation and below the poverty line. When you look at females between the ages of 18 and 24, they're below the poverty line. And where do they live? Well, Chuck, nobody has to take me to where poverty is. Nobody has to take me to where the growth is. You know why? I live there, all right? It is why I fight for my community, and I have been fighting for my community for the last 15 years, because I had the opportunity to move out from where I live, but I chose to stay where I grew. I grew up where there was poverty. Listen, believe it or not, when we were growing up, we didn't even know we were poor, all right? We did what we had to do with what we had. Now, as we look towards growth, first thing we have to do is we look at the economy and how we look at the growth. The growth has to come, the jobs also have to come to lift up people's wages, all right? To lift up the quality of the jobs that we are bringing to town, and I'm talking about the pharmaceutical jobs. Now just think about this. Suppose we had the pharmaceutical industry here now who could produce the things that the medical people need at our hospitals. We could produce the masks. We could produce the ventilators machine right here in Chatham County. But now what we have to do is do what? Go overseas to get them. So when we're talking about growth, what needs to come to the table, and I say it again, we have in place, all right, a plan, and we call it for the county blueprint. But the blueprint has to have a master plan. You have to plan your work and then work your plan in order to get where we need to be. And right now, we are not doing that, all right? We're not doing it at the level that we should do it at.
Thank you. Thank you. Commissioner Jones, I want to offer you a response here. Is growth for the sake of growth in the best interest of Chatham County?
Well, first off, let me go ahead and put this out, John and Chuck. First off, if I'm around poverty, the first thing I would have led off with was I'm around poverty and I know what it's all about. Number 2 point, I'm one class away from having a master's degree in urban planning and studies. So I got a background in urban planning and studies, and I understand how urban trends happen. And guess what else I want you to also understand, Chuck and John? That guess what? Poverty is coming my way because that same side of town that he was just talking about is being gentrified out and pushed into the South Side area. I see it every single day, brother. I see it every single day when I ride my street and how the neighbors in my street change every single day. Now, I'm not one of those ones who say, man, we need to keep that from coming on my side of town, because I understand that everybody needs an opportunity. I think everybody should be able to see growth and have growth happen in their community. So do I believe in growth? Yes, Chuck, I believe in growth. Whether I believe it or not, guess what, Chuck? It's coming. It ain't nothing we can do about it to stop it, brother. Because I foresee this population doubling and tripling within the next 10, 15 years. Because you know what? In the North, you have all this COVID-19 happen, and they see in the South that is happy-go-lucky and the property taxes are cheaper and everything else is cheaper. So they're going to move down here whether we want them or not. So growth is going to come whether we want it or not. The best thing we can do is be prepared for growth when it happens and make sure we have things in play. So when our tax systems and if we want to do impact fees and all the other stuff I know we're going to talk about later on, if we want to do all those things, then we need to be prepared and in action to receive all those kind of things, sir.
Yes, thank you, Jay. We certainly will be getting into some of the mechanisms available to the county to properly manage growth. But right now, we're going to go over to John for some questions on ethics. John?
Thank you, Chuck. It's interesting that you guys mentioned the county's program called Blueprint. And if I can take a point of liberty, since I was a commissioner, your current chairman 8 years ago said he would introduce a 5-year plan. I don't think that materialized. And what I want to ask you guys is your ethics ordinance. I looked this up yesterday. It hasn't been amended or updated in 15 years. It's from 2005. So having said that, here's my question. The Savannah City Council, the new council just elected, is currently updating their ethics ordinance to include or mandate disclosure of any campaign contributions over $250 received from any person or entity that has done business with the city of Savannah in the prior 12 months or is currently attempting to do business with the city through the bid process. Would you support updating your ethics ordinance and including something similar for county commissioners at the county level? Jay?
Most definitely, John, may I answer? Most definitely, I would most definitely do that. I think that's not the only ordinance. I think it's a whole bunch of ordinances that need to be updated and brought up to code with 2020 as far as that's concerned. And with COVID-19, we're probably going to look at them even harder now. So I do think that that's something we do need to look at. I don't think we need to put that to the citizens, because I think that if we're in office, we should be held to an ethical standard, a better practice than anything else. And anything you want to hold me to as far as ethics is concerned, I'm all in agreement for doing. So I'm all for that, sir.
Thank you. Commissioner Ellis.
Yeah, our ethics committee is one that is appointed, and it's a 3-board committee. All right, and I think that the last time in the research that I did, because when this came up to us when we were making committees appointments, okay, and they brought it, and I asked for the fact sheets of just what the ethics committee do and just who was on the ethics committee. The county has used the ethics committee only when there was a complaint, an ethical complaint about a commissioner doing their jobs in the line of duty, and it had to do with what their duties and responsibilities were. The last time they used it was 2010, all right? And what the practice has been that they would take and reappoint in some cases. In other cases, if there was a conflict in one of the or two of the reappointment, they would appoint someone new when they needed the ethics committee. Now, does that need changing? Yes. COVID-19 is going to make us change a whole lot of ordinance and a whole lot of the way we do business, because there's a new norm on the horizon, and it's not coming, it's already here. So we're going to have to take all our ordinances and all our rules of operations, and we're going to have to do a fact check of how we need to change those things, because there's going to be a new way of doing business in the upcoming years. And Colvin just pointed out some of the weak points that we have. And so now is our time to take those things to strengthen it.
Okay, thanks. Chuck, can I get a quick follow-up with Commissioner?
Go ahead.
I appreciate your answer, Commissioner, and it's in the larger context. Could I ask you please to tell us on the micro level, the specific change over at the city to mandated disclosure of a contribution of $250 or more from anybody that's done business with the city to a sitting older person or mayor? Would that pose any problems for you at the county, or would you support something like that specifically?
No, it doesn't pose any problems. I would support it. And listen, I would even bring it down to where the state has us when we fill out our ethical form. Anyone who contributes more than $100 to your campaign, you have to disclose them, all right? If you get a loan from anyone, you have to disclose them. So I think that the county should be operated in that same mode, so that we disclose all those, so that we don't have conflicts of interest, so that we don't have folks who have to recuse themselves because there is a conflict of interest with someone who wants to do business with the county.
Very good.
So,
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Commissioner Jones, you follow up?
Yes, sir. My follow-up is going to be brief. I hope John, Chuck, I hope next week when y'all do this, same conversation, y'all ask for written affidavits. Because I don't think they're going to say yes or no, whatever. But if you don't have written affidavits next week, it's going to be a waste of time conversation. I'm only echoing to say it again, that not only this code, but every code needs to be readdressed, relooked at, and we need to make sure we bring ourselves into the 21st century as far as all our coding is concerned in the mini codes. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Jay, let me ask you a follow-up question here. The Chatham County Ethics Board has 3 members. Do you know who they are? Should that board be changed or expanded given the growth in the county?
I asked that question several times, and I will agree with Commissioner Ellis. That was something we had talked about, real hardcore about. I think it's something, and I'm glad you brought that up. I think it's something, if they're not doing enough, then what we need to do is we need to give them more work to do. I think there's a whole lot of things we can talk about when it comes to ethical codes in our community, when it comes to the county commission, that they could be addressing a whole lot more than for him to be coming every 10 years up to an appointment and being able to do something. So I think what we need to do is we need to get with our state legislature. We need to get with those people who put these rules in play as far as what the ethical code standards can be done. And we need to come up with some hardcore press things to hold them accountable to make sure they're doing a lot more. Because I can't tell you this one thing, Chuck. They older than my grandfather, and my grandfather's been deceased for a long time.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Before we move on to SPLOST, I want to offer the final word on the ethics ordinance issue to Commissioner Ellis. Any final thoughts, Commissioner Ellis?
About ethics?
Yes, sir.
Let me say it this way, John, you and Chuck. You know where ethics starts? With the individual. That's where it starts. Yes, we need to have ethics rules in place, but we need to hold folks in place so that they have integrity. You know, there was once upon a time when deals were made by a handshake. And once you make that deal, what? You kept that deal. And I think that people knowing that I'm going to have a problem if I accept monies from this person or that person because they're dealing with the county, I think all those things need to be disclosed. And again, I say, if we mirror and make it conducive to Chatham County, what the state has in this ethics plan, then we do a better job with ethics than we have. Now, granted, we have not had a problem with ethics in Chatham County because, like I said, the last ethics committee met and they talked about something that one of the commissioners did, but they found that it wasn't a violation. Okay, there was some talk about another commissioner, but there wasn't any ethics charges because what he did and how he did it had nothing to do with his job. It had nothing to do with any contribution.
I think I know what you're referring to there, and it was a minor case. Thank you for that. We're going to move on now to the special purpose local option sales tax. We have several questions in this category. We're going to give you guys some pretty broad latitude to develop your answers on these questions. We'll go to John McMasters for the first question on SPLOST.
Okay, thanks, Chuck. Gentlemen, back in SPLOST 4, voters approved tens of millions of dollars for a new courthouse to replace the Montgomery Street Judicial Courthouse. This project was never undertaken. Instead, the SPLOST money was used to buy and refurbish a couple of buildings nearby, the Pete Lukakis building. Now, 15 years later, the county has asked the city to issue $80 million in bonds to build the new courthouse, and the bonds will be paid off from SPLOST 7, which we just voted on in November, but doesn't begin to collect until fourth quarter of this year. My question to you is, and I know this new courthouse predates your time on the commission. Why can't the county deliver to the voters on a major SPLOST project like that? And what would you do as chairman to restore confidence in the SPLOST project delivery scheduling at the county level. Jay, please.
Well, unfortunately, SPLOST 4, I was probably in high school in SPLOST 4, I'll be honest with you. I think what we have to do is, when it comes to SPLOST projects, I look at this point. We have to elect good leaders. And that's upon us as voters to make sure we're voting good leaders in that make decisions on behalf of SPLOST projects for us. That's problem number one. Last year, and I can only speak on what I know as far as SPLOST. Hopefully I can answer your question. If I don't, I'll dig deeper. But last year when we talked about SPLOST, the city of Savannah brought almost $900 million worth of SPLOST projects to us, understanding that they were only going to get right at about $200 million worth of SPLOST projects at most. Now, everybody and their mama was talking about we're going in a recession next year. So you even say if it's 200 million, you want to even cut that back down to at least $140 million. But they presented to us the first time they presented something, $800 something million worth of SPLOST money, which was ridiculous. But once again, is it a failure of leadership? A failure of leadership. And I'm gonna get there, John. I'm gonna get there. I see you. I'm gonna get there. It's a failure of leadership, John. And so the only way we're going to change this is we have to empower people in our community to understand we have to vote the right kind of leaders in office, whether it was 20 years ago or whether it's 20 years moving forward, to make sure we have an agenda. What I tell people every time they come to me and say, well, don't you think the first district didn't get enough or the fifth district get enough? What I tell them is this, John, and what I tell them this, Chuck, I say, you know what? Right now is what we need to be talking about, the 2026 SPLOST. Right now, we should be talking about 2026 SPLOST. You know why? Because we should be building a covenant toward what we want to have in our communities as a whole. That has not been done. And because we're given a SPLOST plan and we just sit back and say, hey, well, that's what the city's gonna give us. That's what these people are gonna give us. We move forward on it. And it becomes unfair as a SPLOST program when it comes to a whole county as a whole. And I rambled on for all that to say this, John. 20 years ago, it should have been done. But John, there are projects in my district that 20 years ago, that should have been done. And guess what? I'm giving every excuse under the book why they weren't done. And so as a county chairman, I'm going to ensure whatever projects that were voted on should be done and will be done. It's hard for me to talk about what I couldn't do and what I couldn't control, but it's easy for me to talk about what I can control if I become elected as the county chair.
Okay, but before Commissioner Ellis gets this, Jay, I was squirming only because when I was on the commission in the early 2000s, Floyd and Michael Brown came over to the commission, and they too wanted $250 million when in fact they were probably going to get 90, maybe 95 million. So I feel your pain, brother. That's the way it's been. And I appreciate your answer that we have to be realistic. I agree, but we have to be effective. And I think that's your point as well.
I agree. But I think we need to make sure the voters understand we got to put the right people in play to make sure that SPLOST is done correctly. Because when I got the question, it was about SPLOST reform. And my thing, when I see SPLOST reform, I'm saying we want to take away SPLOST. SPLOST is a good tool if used wisely and correctly. We can get a lot of effective things done.
Agreed.
Agreed. Thank you.
Commissioner Ellis, do you want to comment or rebut on this?
Well, let me say this, Chuck, you and John. What happened back then, all right, and how they moved those SPLOST funds then shows you that there was no transparency. It shows you that there was no accountability, all right? Okay. It's a new day and a new time. There's a new sheriff in town that's called transparency. There's a new sheriff in town who's called responsibility, all right? Somewhere when we do the research, if those monies were not spent on other SPLOST projects, then somebody violated the law. So the research needs to be done because, John, here's one of the things you'll find. There are SPLOST projects that come out of 4, SPLOST projects that come out of 5, that haven't been completed, but the money is there. The money is sitting there. And so when we talk about SPLOST reform, listen, we have to work with all 8 of the communities, all right, to ensure that their priorities are included. Receive direct input from the citizens. When we talk about SPLOST reform, I will ensure that the funds that are collected are used for what they were intended for. What did you collect them for? So if you collect those monies for a courthouse, it's just like going into this new building of the new courthouse, all right? The annex, if you want to call it that. If there are monies that are still in SPLOST 4 that was intended for that courthouse, they need to be included in the new courthouse that we are getting ready to build now, okay? So significant review of the management of our infrastructure is needed, all right? And our economy recovery, we need to make sure we know what we're doing. We need to make sure how we know we're doing. And then we need to plan for growth. And when we put those things on the table, then we can look back to see exactly what happened to the funds in SPLOST 4 that was supposed to go to the courthouse. And I think we should be held accountable. Now, am I being held accountable for my ancestors? Yes. See, because those who were on the commission who decided to do something else with the monies were not doing what was right. They weren't transparent and they were not correct in what they were doing, all right?
Well,
and so can we go back and correct mistakes? In some instance we can, all right? And I think going forward that when we go back and we look at what was done with SPLOST 4 monies that was supposed to go to the courthouse and weren't, we need to explain that. Like Jay said, he was in high school, all right? Some of us were somewhere else doing some other things. We did not know. And you cannot be held accountable for what you did not know. But when you do know, you do better than when you did not know. And so
I like your
those
sentiment.
coming.
I like your sentiment, Chester, and your sense of morality, if you will, on this. But let me let you guys off the hook a little bit here. I'm 100% confident that your county attorney, John Hart, advised those commissioners that wanted to repurpose that SPLOST money over to the VeriSign building and the Pete Lukakis building, that they had total legal authority to do so. Whether or not that was legally correct is a different debate for a different day, but I think you guys have been there long enough to see that the county attorney tends to write very consistent opinions with staff recommendations. So let's leave that for now. I'm going to put it back to Chuck for the next.
Thank you. I have a follow-up question, actually, John, on this specific issue and question. And I specifically want to ask both candidates about the decision to enter into an intergovernmental agreement to bond out the courthouse project early, based on a SPLOST collection that was, uncollected. This deal was presented to City Council less than 10 weeks ago and was voted on by that City Council as this crisis kind of unfolded. I want to ask this question to both of you, and I'll start with you, Commissioner Jones. Do you think it was wise for the county government to enter into an intergovernmental agreement for a bond with the city bonding authority based on an uncollected SPLOST that looks like it's not going to collect at 100% level?
I don't think it was.
You're on mute, Jay.
I got you. I don't think it was wise.
Thank you for that quick answer, Chester. I mean, if you're good with just that, Jay, I'll look for Commissioner Ellis's answer.
Let me say this, Chuck. The city of Savannah didn't have to vote, and they didn't need to vote. The law doesn't require them to vote, all right? But they decided to vote. That was something they wanted to do. The only thing that they needed to have was read into their records. And it's because, again, let's go back to when we first discussed, there are ordinances and there are things that need to be changed, all right? Written in the rules of operation, written in the ordinances of operation, is that Savannah Authority is the bonding agent by which we use. We question that. on the day it came before us, why do we have to use this? The county ought to have its own bonding mechanism so that they don't have to go, all right? So we questioned that, and we were given, and the rules are read to us from the charter as to how that was set up. And so we are predating my birth almost when we look at that, all right? So it had to be gone over to city council for them to read into the record so that we can move on. We could do it without them, without their vote. It didn't matter whether they voted yes or no. We could do it without them because that's what the charter and the rule says. All right. So,
Commissioner, let me ask you a follow-up, because I understand where you're taking this answer, but I think the question specifically is, was it a wise choice to base the repayment of a bond that you entered into the city with? Not whether or not the city should have been involved. I understand your point there, but do you think it was a wise move to enter into that agreement based on an uncollected SPLOST during the middle of a global pandemic?
Sure. I stand by my vote. I voted to let's do it, and I stand behind my vote. Yes. If I voted yes for us to do it, then that means that I'm behind it. I'm not going to vote then, and what I say to you is, listen, integrity plays a large part with me, all right? I stand on what I say, and I say on what I stand. And so, yes, I did vote for us to do it. And so, therefore, I stand behind it.
Thank you. Thank you for that answer. Jay, would you like to follow up?
Chuck, for the record, I did not vote for it. I was not in the room.
I got you. I'm going to move on to another question. I understand and agree with that, Commissioner Ellis. I want to ask another question. The city of Savannah's budget is facing shortfalls. I've heard numbers like $150,000 a day they are losing. As that pressure mounts, it may come to a decision point where the city would need to declare the arena project infeasible. If the city were to make this move and send this language to the county for a ballot referendum, would you vote to repurpose the SPLOST money in SPLOST 6 to pay off old city debt? Jay?
Yes, I would. I think one thing about the arena project that I don't agree with is it took too long for us to get here. I think that the amount of money that we originally went out like 20 years ago now is now astronomical and compared to what the actual cost will be. And all we're going to do is keep digging and digging and digging and digging and digging and out of debt. However, once again, I would want to put that out to the people because I think the people need to be the one who make that decision. And I think it'd be a wise decision if the city of Savannah asks for that to be put on the referendum as far as the ballot's concerned. And so the people can make that ultimate decision on how that plays out. But once again, I don't live on that side of town, so I'm not as affected as those people who live on that side of town. Commissioner Ellis would be more affected than I would. So that's just an opinion of what I got, but I would want to hear what the voters would have to say before I would even give an answer on that, sir.
Absolutely, no doubt about that. There are a lot of passionate views on this issue, and we respect all sides of this debate. Commissioner Ellis, you've represented and worked in the West Side for a long time. You have a long storied career there. I'd like your take on whether the arena project is still viable. If the city were to declare it infeasible, would you support a vote on the county commission for another ballot referendum to repurpose that money to pay off old debt?
I don't deal with ifs and ands, all right? That has never come before us. The city is going forward with the arena project because the money has been collected. The money is in the pot for it. Now, whether we get to the point of whether it's feasible or not feasible, the city have to determine that. And as a county commissioner, I don't think that I should have the authority. Now, as a citizen, I may have a different point of view, all right? But as a county commissioner, I shouldn't dictate to the city what projects are feasible or not feasible. But let me ask this question. Why do you just want to pick on the arena project? There are other projects that the city is doing in other districts all over the county besides the arena projects. We don't talk about them becoming infeasible and not being done. We just want to talk about the arena, all right? But the arena was designed when it was first put apart was to what? Enhance that which has been neglected for 50 years, all right? So I'm a strong opponent of let us stick with the plans of how we can get the West Side to receive some of the benefits, because now when you look at it, the first district on the West Side is one of the richest area that the city has in land and so forth. They have resources here. There was a discussion just this past Thursday about $5.7 million. All right. So if you're going to get $5.7 million for property that is in the first district, then that money ought to be used for the first district to enhance what has been neglected. Okay. So why just pick on the arena project? Why not look at everything that is in the SPLOST that they have on the table to do, rather than just the arena project?
You know, Commissioner Ellis, I think that's a perfectly valid rebuttal. I think we would welcome any and all other SPLOST projects that you think should be declared infeasible. Certainly, those who live in and around the Pipemakers Canal were excited about a drainage project that ultimately got repurposed in the last 15 years at the county level. So I think it's a perfectly valid response. Would you like to follow up with any final thoughts on that issue?
Well, the only thing I would say to you, Chuck, is when you look at the Pipemakers Canal and the repurposing and what was supposed to have done that wasn't done, then I think you ought to pat Commissioner Kicklight and myself on the back, because we were the catalyst behind getting that done that was supposed to have been done that didn't get done. And so now those on the West Side will see the benefits of repurposing.
Thank you. And before I shift it back to John to talk about possible legislative changes with SPLOST, Commissioner Jones, any follow-up thoughts on this issue?
I want to go ahead and make sure I say it again. I think the city of Savannah needs to make the decision. I'm not saying that it doesn't need to happen. I said the city of Savannah needs to make the decision. So I hope I'm quoted to say that the city of Savannah needs to make that decision. Thank you.
I think we all like to be quoted correctly. I can perfectly agree with that. John, do you have some thoughts on this issue, or do you want to go to the next question, John?
Well, yeah, let me just put a postscript to this arena thing, and then I'll take the next question, Chuck. Our viewers probably are wondering why we're talking about you county guys having anything to do with the city project. We all know, but our viewers don't understand, that SPLOST is a county tax. It is not a municipal option sales tax. Because of that legal standing, everything having to do with SPLOST, either a new SPLOST collection period or a repurposing question vis-a-vis Pipemakers Canal, the controlling authority is the county, because it was originally a county tax. So people probably aren't gathering that, but that's the nature of it. The last postscript on this to Commissioner Ellis's comment about why talk about the arena. I'll just personally add, Commissioner Ellis, that this was an $80 million project originally, and it's now a $165 million project. So clearly we could talk about smaller SPLOST projects, but this one project has sucked all the oxygen out of the SPLOST collection period and the city's portion for that SPLOST 6. So,
John, if I can just say this,
sure.
Now, because if we
take a follow-up, Commissioner Ellis.
Yeah, if we're gonna go there, let's make sure we're clear. All right. Okay. If mismanagement of monies, and I'm talking about $48 million, that was in the original arena splash fund had not been moved and moved to a drainage project somewhere else, the arena could be up and running by now. But then again, that we go back to what? Transparency, we go back to accountability, and we go back to sound fiscal management. All right. So when I say and I want to make sure you understand me now. For the last 18 years, I've been working with the arena project and with the splash fund. So therefore, splash funds were there, but they weren't used properly. And I still said that we should hold the city of Savannah accountable to put that $48 million that they spent out of the original splash funds, put it back.
Yeah.
Thank you for those thoughts, Commissioner.
Chuck, can I ask Commissioner Ellis a follow-up question?
Absolutely.
Sure.
How much, we know the arena is sitting now at 165 million.
Right.
Commissioner Ellis, what is the anticipated cost of the Canal District?
There has been no plans drawn up for the Canal District. A few weeks ago, I think that the city voted to put monies into the planning for. The Canal District is a concept and an idea. And the Canal District came out of a larger arena committee that was started, and there were 56 members from all walks of life who were part of that major, all right? And they were supposed to, it was called the Arena Committee, but when they broke into 6 different subgroups and the subgroups started turning in their reports, that's where the idea of the Canal District came about, okay? So as you and I sat and talked today, there is no money in the Canal District, no money in the city budget for the Canal District. But the idea and the concept of making the whole thing a Canal District and it being an economic engine for the city, it came out of conversations between 56 members of the original arena committee. Now, we got to a point where somebody had the brilliant idea to disband, they disbanded that committee. And they tried to take the ideas from that committee and go forward with it. Well, one of the problems you have is if it's your plan, I can't execute your plan because I don't know your plan as well as you do. See? And so that's how that came about.
Okay. Thank you for going down that rabbit hole on a very complex and controversial issue. We did it very collegially, and I appreciate that. Let me ask the next SPLOST question. And this is something that we know is under discussion in Atlanta with the governor, with legislative council, given the COVID-19 impacts to local budgets. Would you support a legislative change that would allow cities and counties to borrow some amount from their SPLOST deposits whenever a statewide state of emergency is declared? The borrowed funds would most likely be repaid and pushed ahead to the next SPLOST collection. Jay, we've been missing you. Why don't you take that one?
Wow. I think the problem we already just discussed for the last 5-10 minutes alludes straight to my response saying no. I think that we would have to put a lot of limitations involved into it. I believe that when we vote on SPLOST projects, they need to stick to whatever those SPLOST projects are, and we need to maneuver and take care of those SPLOST projects. I think we need to put time limits on SPLOST projects. When we say we're gonna do a SPLOST project, once we start collecting revenue, we need to make sure SPLOST projects, we shouldn't be working on SPLOST projects for when I was in high school right now. We should, all this
That's a
project.
very good point.
Splash 1, Splash 2, Splash 3, Splash 4 should all be done as far as I'm concerned. When I got on county commission, I saw that we still have projects in those splash periods. I say, wow, are we not collecting revenue? The revenue was sitting there. We just weren't doing the project. So my thing is, I would right now, especially talking about what we just discussed for the last 30 minutes, my heart would be saying no, unless we put all kind of standards in play to ensure that we repay that money back in a timely order. So that would be my short and sweet answer, sir.
Commissioner Ellis, you want to posit on this, or?
When we go before the voters with SPLOST projects, all right, we say to them, this is what we're going to do with that money. What I see we need is we need strong management of our infrastructure. Again, your word is your bond. So when we talk about, because of COVID-19, wanting to go back to the legislator and repurpose some SPLOST funds, we have not been to the voters. The voters have not asked for that, all right? So our legislative group now, if there are some voters talking to our legislative group about that, then I have not heard about that, okay? And so therefore, what I would say is that we promise in the monies that we have collected with SPLOST, we promise that we would do certain projects and we should be held accountable to getting those projects done. Now, if the governor and the legislative body comes back and do some redesigning of what the SPLOST is set up for, okay, then we'd have to abide by the law.
Fair enough. I just want to make an important postscript here. In fairness to you guys, your word is your bond. Your county commissioners and the problems that we've been discussing, as Jay said, for the last 30 minutes here, surrounding undone SPLOST projects and escalating costs and disappointments. Gentlemen, isn't this the failure of your staffs, both at the city and the county? You guys are an executive board of directors. The people that actually implement these projects and make certain that dirt turns and pipe gets laid and things get finished, that falls on your manager and your respective departments, does it not?
It does.
Okay.
It does.
Commentary?
Yeah, it does.
Okay.
But it's the commissioner's job to make sure it gets done. All right, because the people don't come after staff; they come at you as a collected, as an elected official.
Fair
as
enough.
to those things that should be done, one of the things that I'll say again, Chuck, is that, and John, is that we have to be accountable for the management of our infrastructure. All right. And being accountable for the management of our infrastructure, you identify projects that need to be done before the voters vote. You have to send that list, each municipality send it to the county sends to the state, all right, what it's going to do with that money, all right? So therefore, that should be our check and balance. See, the citizens should hold the elected officials accountable, and whether we're talking about the municipalities and what they put in the SPLOST, or whether we talk about the county and what it puts in the SPLOST, or whether we're talking about what passes. Once it passed, the citizens have said, this is what we want. And I think because we're using citizens' dollars, this is what they should get.
I get it.
Thank you.
I get it.
Go ahead, Jay.
All right. I'll say it again, and I'll say it clear. Do I agree? I think that we need to have a better process as far as how we've done SPLOST in the past. Moving forward, that's something we need to make sure in this SPLOST period, SPLOST 7, SPLOST 7, SPLOST 8, that we're actually working toward making sure these things happen. I think it's a failure. Yes, I believe it's a failure. It's not just a failure on staff. It's a failure on us as far as commissioners, whether it was my term, the term before me, any term out there. One thing I did do early on in my my administration, when I was in office, 17, 18, I kept up with those splosh. I have not kept up with it as often as I should in 19 and 20. And 20 has been a disastrous year with COVID-19, worrying about everything else under the sun. And that was part of my game plan in 2020, was to get back and looking at what was going on as far as splosh projects concerned. To answer your question though, I would have to have a hard, deep dive in order to ask citizens to say, hey, this is an emergency and I need to use these funds and I promise to get it back, because we have shown a history of not being able to perform, I guess, in a timely manner when it comes to splosh dollars.
Okay.
Thank you. John, it's okay with you. I think we should move on to public safety.
Yes.
Now, I think we've talked enough about a dead horse beating it here on splosh. We'll start again here with you, Commissioner Jones. Do you believe there is a direct correlation between crime statistics and poverty levels? And just for some background, we asked this question to the district attorney candidates earlier this afternoon, and we got some wide-ranging answers from those two candidates. So given that you are running to lead the policy-making body for the county, again, the question is, what do you believe is the correlation, if any, between crime statistics and poverty levels here in Chatham County? Jay?
Of course, I think not just crime statistics, but where areas and locations where we go out and search out crime is a problem. I think that equity, as far as how I can provide for my family, feeds into that whole piece right there. I think as far as our job and workforce development, education system, I can go on and on about all the elements that feed into this piece right here. But when you say crime statistics feed into poverty, yes, I do. When I go to the courthouse and I can't pay a ticket because I don't have a job, or when I go to the courthouse and I park my car, and then while I'm out there, the courthouse for 2 hours, I go back to my car. Now I got another ticket I got to pay for. There's all kind of inequities that play all into the system. And I don't think that we're taking a deep dive to see how we can be fair and give a group of people an opportunity to stop castigating them as criminals, and make sure we do everything we can to give them opportunity to be equitable in our community. And so I'm not going to be long-winded on that. Yes, there's a direct correlation between crime and poverty. And we have to be the ones as leaders in our community to say, hey, let's look at the various crimes that happen in our community. What are tied to those systematic problems that exist in our community, so we can see what we can do to alleviate some of those systematic problems, so we can see if we can reduce those crimes. Because I have no problem persecuting and taking care of those crimes that are heinous crimes and crimes that happen. But those crimes that are tied to issues because I'm hungry, and I'm not trying to say give them a buddy pass, and I'm not trying to say don't persecute them, anything like that. But we have to do a better job of making sure we understand the correlation between those two pieces. And that's a convoluted question, and I'm all over the place with it, because that question is close to my heart, because I've seen people who've been taken out of a system because of crime and put into a poverty zone. And I know how hard it is, Chuck Fagan, because when I moved back here 13 years ago and applied for a job with a college degree, with a nice college degree, and I applied for a job and I couldn't get a job. I can only imagine how hard it is for somebody who has a criminal background, somebody who doesn't have the education, somebody who don't have the narrative to get out of poverty. I can only imagine how hard it could be, sir. So I'm gonna leave it at that, and I'll be glad to rebuttal if it's any system.
Yeah, I think we might come back to you. I want to bring Commissioner Ellis onto this discussion. Obviously, I think one of the reasons West Side leaders are so very passionate about some of the ongoing projects in the area is simply because of the opportunity it presents to perhaps alleviate some of that poverty. Again, the original question, Commissioner Ellis, was what do you believe is the correlation, if any, between crime statistics and poverty levels? Feel free to expound.
There's a direct correlation, Chuck. And not only when you're talking about crime and poverty, but you're also talking about education, all right? And one of the things, the fourth part of that pizza, that puzzle, all right, is that neglect. Because those areas where poverty is strongest, where crime is highest, all right, where education is lowest, it's because of the neglect. For too long, we have been exclusive and not inclusive of certain areas in Chatham County. Yes, we can bring up the poverty rate, but you know what it takes? It takes investment in those areas, investment in those people who live in that area. It takes investment in our fellow citizens in Chatham County to help with that. So when you talk about poverty and you talk about crime, you got to bring in the education. When you bring in the education, you got to bring in the neglect.
Jay, I want to offer a follow-up to you right here. Do you have some additional comments?
Yes, sir. I want to put this additional comment out here. I deal with my PTA at my child's school, and what it did was it opened another interesting point talking about education. COVID-19, what it has done to us as a community is it showed that poverty is worse than what we even thought about in our community. And what I mean by that is now, when you have 20 kids in a classroom and 4 kids don't have the technology to be able to keep up with what's going on in the classroom, and I can only imagine in certain areas throughout our community, then what happens is the narrative gets even bigger than what it was before we even had a conversation about COVID-19. And so when I talk about poverty, poverty is going to get even worse what goes on with COVID-19. The job rate, if you don't know it yet, the job rate is skyrocketing right now. As far as jobs not being available, has skyrocketed. And so more people are on unemployment, more people are unemployed, and more people are sitting at home than ever before. And so if we're not in leadership position, if we're not ready to address this, crime is going to go up. Because I'm going to tell you now, when people are hungry, they're going to do what they got to do to eat. I'm not condoning that, but I just know that's a way of the system. And so what we have to do is, as leaders right now, we have to address this issue hands on. And we can't wait to 2020 when one of us is the chairman or somebody is the chairman. We got to address this right now, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. We'll go to John McMasters with our next question in public safety.
Okay. The newly reconstituted Chatham County Police Department has approximately 110, 115 officers to service the unincorporated population, which is 92,000 people. That's a ratio of 1.3 officers per 1,000. According to national data, that's a very low ratio for a suburban area. Do you see a need to increase that ratio up closer to 1.5 officers per 1,000, which is kind of the national standard or average for a suburban area? Who wants this question? Either one. Okay, Jay, let's go with you.
My personal take on it is this. I think that I look at, and John, I hear what you're saying, but I also look at the numbers per I guess officer per 1,000 in relation to what you just stated. When I look at the numbers, I also look at crime in the areas too. And in our unincorporated areas, we don't have nowhere near the crime in any of the municipalities we carry in our government structure. So I think that right now we're fully staffed, or we're close to being as fully staffed we possibly can be. I think right now what we need to do is get more, I guess, get age or maturity or get tenure behind our organization to see if those kind of problems actually happen as far as crime. I can tell you my 2 areas, Walmart, which is the area in my area, Walmart is probably my highest hit crime area, and then the hotels up on 204, my 2 areas. If you look at it, that's where your higher density of populations are moving and migrating. So outside of those 2 areas, I don't have any crime as far as unincorporated area. And when you look at the areas like the 4th district, the 1st district, which have the heavier populations, as far as the county is concerned, you don't have that correlation either. Now, a bigger problem, which I hope we were going to talk about, is how we have annexation spots all over the place where it drops off county, city, county, city, county, city, where we don't really know where the jurisdiction is. I think that's a bigger problem we need to address, and making sure our MOUs are in line to address those situations. Because I know for a fact, there's been several times on 204 where an officer didn't know which jurisdiction needed to reply because we had that annexation problem going on. So those are things that I think we need to spend more time on talking about, ensuring that MOUs between us and the city governments are strong enough where we're not trying to figure out who needs to go there and we just need to send somebody there.
Agreed. The annexation, creating these islands, a management disaster, I agree. Commissioner Ellis.
Let me say that the covering of the unincorporated areas by our county police force is better than what it was before we demerged. All right. We are, it's not that we don't have the resources to cover the unincorporated areas. One of the problems that the chief said he's running into is training qualified people. All right. There was a class that they were training folks in, and I think the class was made up of about 18 candidates, and of that 18, only 6 of them made the force. Wow. Right. So when you talk about covering, and when you're looking at the national numbers, and when you're looking at our numbers here in Chatham County, okay, our police force, our law enforcement force is at the point where it's growing, is improving. We have a good program that they're going through. In fact, the chief not a couple of months ago gave us a outline of what his plans were as we move forward and how we're going to carry that out. And one of the things that he said in one of his briefings that he gives us bi-monthly is that that problem we have between is this unincorporated, is there an unincorporated, and that the annexation. Well, the county police force is one of only 2 law enforcement that can answer crime anywhere, okay? The sheriff being the other. So when an officer rolls up on a crime, they decide after they have brought the situation in to control as to whether the city of Savannah need to be called in or Garden City needs to be called in or who, all right? But the main thing is that we have great, and I shouldn't say great either, we have very good crime statistics, all right? We have areas now that are in municipalities that have real strong problems. But as far as the unincorporated areas, we're getting good coverage.
Well, thank you. And I'm going to give the next question over to Chuck, but let me just, as a postscript, say, despite all the questioning, I want to give you guys kudos for the professionalism and the speed with which you reconstituted your county department after the demerger. It was a textbook example of fluid dynamics and organization, and it happened quickly and it happened well. So hats off to you guys. You made that happen. Chuck?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, John. This will be our last question in the public safety area. The sheriff of Chatham County is running unopposed this year. There is legislation in the General Assembly in Atlanta right now to end county police departments and shift public safety to the sheriff's department. Given that we were just talking about how well the county department was reconstituted after the demerger, do you support this legislative change? If so, why? If not, why not? We'll begin with you, Commissioner Ellis.
No, I don't support it. If we were talking about an area that was, let's say, and I'm not picking on them, I'm just using that as an example, sure, the size of Ludowici and that county, and you would need a county police department, okay? But in Chatham County, all right, we have problems right now having the sheriff staff everything he needs to cover everything he needs under the Constitution, because he is a constitutional officer. He has certain responsibilities. He's having problems getting those positions filled, all right? Right off the top of my head, I can't tell you how many vacancies he has, but I do know he has vacancies that he's trying to cover. So I'm not in support of the legislators doing away with county police forces, because then it becomes more of a dictatorship than anything else.
Thank you. Commissioner Jones, is that true that the sheriff is having trouble filling or fulfilling all of his constitutional duties as it is? And again, the original question was that there's legislation in Atlanta right now to end county police departments and shift those public safety responsibilities to the sheriff's department. What do you think about all this?
Yes, there is truth to that. The sheriff has had a hard time with it. I know we dealt with it because it was an issue of pay, and if our pay was similar to their pay, and was the pay similar to any other pay, it was all kind of different reasons and excuses given as far as that piece was concerned. I don't get into the sheriff because the sheriff is an elected official just like I am, and he's a constitutional officer. I think someone, if they don't like the sheriff, we need to run somebody against the sheriff, and that's always been my policy and procedure when it comes to the sheriff. The sheriff is the high constitutional officer in Chatham County. So that is absolutely positively true. The problem with it is you probably got 30 rural counties that fit above the 20,000 population in the state of Georgia, and the rest, I'm sorry, 30 urban counties and about 129 rural counties that would benefit from that kind of statement. It would hurt the 30 urban counties from being able to benefit. And I think that we all, as Chatham County is, as we're seeing the policing enforcing right now, what we got going on, we would be hurt if we turned it over into the sheriff's hands. Not saying that he's a bad guy, not saying that I'm agreeing or disagreeing with him. I'm just saying that I think the services that we're providing right now as a county is the best service we can provide as a county right now. And I think there was a reason why we chose to do it versus turning it over and letting the sheriff do it. And so him being a constitutional officer, I don't really get into the liaisons about that. If it was left up to me, I do not think that we need to pass that law. I will tell you that firmly. When ACCG, which Association of County Commissioners of Georgia, we talked about it in constant conversation, and that was my latitude as far as the conversation. And that's where I heard where the rural counties were really pushing the issue, and in the urban counties, we're really pushing against the issue. So I wouldn't be for it at all, sir.
Thank you, Jay. Thank you, Commissioner Jones. I want to send it back over to John McMasters. We've got a couple questions about affordable housing. John, take it away.
Okay. Forgive me, guys. This takes me back to SPLOST, but I won't stay there for long. Okay. In SPLOST 7, which we all just voted on last November, Chatham County is scheduled to receive a projected $216 million. The county did not include any funding for affordable housing in that list for your $216 million. Savannah was scheduled to get $165 million, less than the county, yet they earmarked $10 million from their share for affordable housing. How did we not accommodate and include something at the county level like the city did for affordable housing in your last SPLOST project list? Commissioner Ellis, you want to help me out with that?
Sure. Let me get to the fact sheet about affordable housing.
Okay.
All right. And these are numbers that have been researched. When we talk about affordable housing, 50% of all households, and I'm talking about Chatham County, all right, are overburdened. They're not affordable. 45% of all households are rentals property, okay? And so when affordable housing is determined by one's income. So this is why I say that we have to bring in more high-paying jobs, all right? The middle income are and they get this thing between whether you are, where you are, but the medium income in Chatham County is $47,218 a year, and that's the average. And the average rent is about $951 per month, all right? So when we talk about affordable housing, there are 3 areas in which I, as the chairman, would focus on, all right? I'll focus on the diversification of our industry, resulting in higher paying jobs and livable wages to balance the cost of housing with the income of our citizens. I'll increase public and private partnerships with local, state, and federal resources, along also having private sectors to partner with at the table so that we could accomplish this goal. And then we must look at it this way. When we evaluate the importance of housing in our housing section, we have to have workforce housing. We have to increase home ownership. We have to have more multi-family housing. We have to have more housing for our seniors. We have to develop a plan, all right, for the temporary housing of our first responders. And when I thought about that, I thought about those first responders who were taking care of people, but they couldn't go home because they didn't know, we didn't have the proper attire for them to take care. And so they couldn't do their jobs as a first responder and in the hospital and in the ambulances and in the fire departments, and then go home to their family because they may have been taking the virus with them. All right. So when we look at those, we need to utilize the resources and increase our availability towards affordable housing at every level. And those levels are part of the affordable housing that we're talking about.
Okay, so you're basically your overarching solution is higher wages, and not.
Well, no. If that's what you understood, no, that's not. What I'm saying to us is, when we talk about affordable housing, we have to talk about affordable housing for who, all right?
Right.
And let me give you an example of, this is a very live example right here in Chatham County. There is a teacher who is homeless because she can't afford the house, all right? There are also, when we look at the state of the affairs we in, and we talk about this COVID-19, for the past 2 days, I have dealt with homeowners who are worried about being foreclosed on. When everything opens up and the banks are allowed to, they're worried about the banks wanting them to do a balloon payment. And so now, when you're talking about affordable housing, these are people who have a good income. They make the $47,000 a year, see? But now, in the situation we're in, they may run into trouble meeting their mortgage, meeting their house note, which is, as I said, which is about $951 a month. So when we talk about, we have to make sure, and what I've been doing with them is I've been pointing them to the stimulus package that we have on the table to help them through this particular situation. So all of that comes in.
Okay, I'm going to move this along. Commissioner Jones, any comment, rebuttal on this question of affordable housing and maybe dedicating future SPLOST funds or higher wages? What's your take on it?
My take on it is this, man. You can talk about higher wages. You can talk about bringing jobs here. You can talk about, as a matter of fact, we've been talking about that the 3 years I've been in office, about bringing these jobs here. Rah, rah, rah. CETA's going to bring jobs. Rah, rah, rah. Chamber's going to bring jobs. Rah, rah, rah. We're going to get more jobs, higher paying jobs, higher paying jobs, higher paying jobs. If we do not put in situations as a county, as a city, as any other entity, as far as government is concerned, to set the tone and say, hey, we want to make sure that so many people are set aside jobs from minorities, whether it be woman, whether it be black, or whatever case may be. If we're not going to invest more money into minority-owned businesses, which can be groomed from poverty-stricken communities, if we're not going to do more workforce development, if we're not going to do education development, if we're not going to fix the dropout rate, which we never talk about, and the dropout rate feeds into the to the graduation rate. You don't see a low graduation rate because they drop out before they turn 16. But we got all these kids walking around here who are 20, 21 years old, who dropped out over the last 10, 15 years. We have no programs out there. If we're not going to address the real root of the cause, sir, we're not going to fix that problem.
Jay,
and so go ahead.
Why do they, I understand we have a problem with the dropout rate and we need to have programs to address it, but let me back you up a step. Why do we have that dropout rate? Why do we have that inordinately high problem?
Because you have to have a workforce to deal with the kind of community we have created over the last 20 years. And that is a low-paying, low-wage workforce that works downtown, that doesn't require a lot of wage, and you can just stick a person in that job.
Wow.
And pull that person out that job, and then someone else can go in that job. And then guess what? We're always going to have a low-paying wage group downtown Savannah, Georgia, and we're never going to get out of poverty because we're never going to pay anybody enough money to be able to afford a house. So until you really address the root cause of the problems, I mean, you just spinning your wheels. We can talk about high-paying jobs all day long, John, but if you ain't got the education to get the high-paying job, what worth is it talking about high-paying jobs? You have to have
John, if you'll let me interject here, I want to ask a follow-up question, because I think you're making some profound statements here, Commissioner Jones. But I think the question we're looking for, is I think the wages and the poverty piece plays a big role, but there's a supply issue. There's not enough houses that can be afforded by workers making less than the median income, as Commissioner Ellis put, at $47,000 or less. Let me ask you a specific question, and feel free to expound on any of these points. In the 2019 county budget, Jay, there's a line item for housing and development, which shows $1.2 million in a line item. However, based on our research with the county, this amount is in fact the county's portion of cost for MPC and SAGES. Don't you think that's a little misleading to call it housing and development when it's really more of an administrative line item?
I think it's greatly misleading, sir.
Thank you.
What should the county be doing, Jay, about the supply issue? The original question from John was about affordable housing funding.
Well, when we talked about last year, when we talked about affordable housing in the county, and I did ask the question when we were talking about the splash and why we didn't get into affordable housing, what was quoted me, what was discussed with me was, we don't really get into affordable housing because you have HUD. And HUD really traditionally has done the affordable housing thing outside of the city limits of Savannah, Georgia, because the bulk of poverty exists in the city limits of Savannah, Georgia. So any structure outside of Savannah, Georgia that's tied to affordable housing is directed through HUD. And so that's why when I heard that conversation, that's why I got on EOA's board, because what does EOA do? EOA deals with HUD funding. And so they deal with resources that tap into affordable housing or helping people get from poverty into actual housing situations.
Thank you, Commissioner Jones. Chester, I'm going to get to you for a follow-up in just a second. We're going to move on to a few more topics to close out our broadcast. But first, I do want to give you that chance to respond on this affordable housing issue. Commissioner Ellis.
I want to add another piece to affordable housing. All right. And that is when we look at affordable housing, I want you to think about this as, and it may be a term that you are not familiar with, but I've got it from the National Association of Counties when we were meeting, and that is income-based housing. All right. When we talk about income-based housing, that will help us to eradicate some of the shortfalls that affordable housing has for us. Now, don't think that I'm against affordable housing, because I am for affordable housing, but I'm learning more about income-based housing to help those now. See, we can talk about those who make the 47,000. We can talk about those who make the 35,000. But what about those who make the $18,000 and $20,000 who can't afford a home? See, and that's what income-based housing will help us to do. And I also found out when I was there in DC in latter part of February and March, is that there are federal funds that can be used for income-based housing.
Thank you, Commissioner Ellis. I want to move on to a question about jobs and more specifically wages, since both of your answers in this previous question really brought us to that issue, which again, I thought were some very profound answers from both of you. I want to talk about the Savannah Economic Development Authority. This, as you both know, but I want to break it down for our viewers, this is a state chartered authority, but it is enabled through local ordinance legislation at the county and the city, since CETA makes deals on your behalf for property tax abatement. So the county commission makes several appointments to the CETA board. CETA puts together deals to attract new businesses to our community. And the property tax abatements that are offered are typically pretty generous, up to 20 years of no property taxes. The loss of the Chatham County School Board and City of Savannah property tax revenue is, of course, done in exchange for the new job creation. But Chatham County, nor the City of Savannah, requires an independent audit of the promised number of jobs or the wages that go along with those deals. Would you be willing to amend the county ordinance that establishes the interagency powers between Chatham County and CETA to require an annual independent audit of all CETA contracts for jobs and salaries created? I want to start with you, Commissioner Ellis, and then we'll go to Commissioner Jones for a rebuttal.
When we talk about CETA, and again, you said that was, see, sometimes the county is caught in what the state legislators pass, all right, and what they establish. CETA gives us, and I have seen the reports, they give us the reports of what they're doing. And one of the things that you're gonna understand about CETA is not a short-term investment, all right? It's a long-term investment. And so the fruits of CETA's labor that comes to the county, we're going to realize in the upcoming years. Now, there is a lull right now, and that lull has been there since November. When I look at the last report, all right, the slowdown is what I mean by a lull. But when we look at the accountability that CETA has to the county commission, if the report that they give us is not satisfactory or in answering your questions, all right, or doesn't give you the accountability that I as a commissioner or any other commissioner is looking for, we can always ask for an in-depth report into what they're getting, how they're spending it, and what the plans for return on the investment is.
I want to push back and follow up, and I promise I'll bring you into this conversation in a moment here, Jay. But Commissioner Ellis, you know, I think our point is that report is self-prepared by the Savannah Economic Development Authority itself. I think it's perfectly valid and good to, you know, maybe say, I'm not sure that these figures are correct. Can you provide us some more detailed figures? But if you ask CETA itself, they will tell you that those are our clients and those informations are client privileged, and they will not release them to the general public. So again, I think the follow-up question is, will you support amending either the enabling county ordinance, or if you have to go to the state legislature to get this changed, will you amend the charter or the ordinance to require an independent audit of those contracts and salaries?
So you're talking about having it so that the general public can see those independent audits that you're talking about? That's what you mean? Is that what you're asking? Because I'm telling you that we do receive reports, all right, as a county commissioner. What you would like to see is, you would like to see CETA be more responsive to the citizens whose taxpaying money they're using, And that's what you're asking me. All right.
Along those lines, yes.
There are three areas that the law requires us that we can't divulge certain information. All right. Those three areas are personnel, litigation, and negotiation. All right. Those happen in executive sessions. Those reports. Now, if you're talking about being able to go to a business and have, because CETA entered into a contract with them to bring them to Chatham County, and you as a citizen want to be able to see their spreadsheet, then I don't think we ought to change the law. That's like me asking you to show me your
That's not it.
your finances. See, and I'm not for that.
I appreciate the feedback. I think it's a fair point. Commissioner Jones, I want to bring you into this conversation about CETA here. Lots of areas we can talk about. Have at it.
Can you repeat the question?
Yes. The County Commission makes several appointments to the Savannah Economic Development Authority Board. CETA puts together deals to attract new businesses to our county and cities. Those deals are very generous, including Chatham County School Board and City of Savannah property tax abatements, and these abatements can be for sometimes up to 20 years. The loss of Chatham County property tax revenue is done in exchange for the new job creation. So again, for example, if Company A promises 1,000 jobs at $17 an hour, we have no mechanism to go back and independently verify years later whether or not, number one, the amount of jobs was created, or number two, the wages for those jobs were actually met. So would you be willing to amend either the county enabling ordinance for the interagency powers between Chatham County and CETA to include independent audits, or if it required a state legislative change, would you go that far to support that legislative change in order to bring about some more transparency with the contracts and deals that are put to place?
Well, one thing I do think is missing is transparency. I think we need to have a longer leg of transparency when it comes to these contracts. I do understand CETA's purpose, and I do understand that certain conversations do need to be in privacy and secrecy and in order. However, I do also believe that you don't give the whole cow away when you when you make your negotiations. I think there should be limitations on whatever we negotiate on, and those limitations and terms we negotiate on should be set up in stone. I think what we're working on is an old constraint where we're giving CETA leverage to do whatever they want to do, and then they're allowed to bring in whatever they can, and then we lose out on those tax opportunities. And then other things is an entity might be given this opportunity at this rate when they're at a smaller unit, but then when they grow and expansion happens, that should be put in the contract. If expansion happens at a certain level, then we change our tax code, because we understand that if you do that, then an organization changes, expands, and they're going for growth in business and they're increasing in size, then I think that their tax code should change, or how whatever abatements or whatever we're giving them should change, because the equity has changed, the opportunity has changed. I don't think we give away I don't think we say, here's 1,500 acres of land and you don't have to pay any taxes forever and ever and ever. And because you're going to bring a job, you're going to bring 1,000 jobs. And then the 1,000 jobs that you bring all live in Effingham County, all live in Bryan County, all live everywhere else. And then we can't track the fact that where are we getting any money at? Because if those people live outside, we're not building the workforce. If they're not getting taxed, we're not getting any tax credits or any kind of money on that. So now we have an entity that's in our community that's just sitting there in our community. And so I think we have to be more thought provoking. Do I say a hard yes on that? No. I think that we need to negotiate amongst the terms. I think we do need to be a little bit more transparent. I don't think we don't need to be as broad-based as we have currently been doing. I think transparency along some points should be involved in the conversation.
Jay, let me follow up with you on a structural change at the CETA board as another possible change that might help bring about some more transparency. And I'll bring the same question to you in just a moment, Commissioner Ellis. Jay, the question is, currently CETA's board is appointed 1/3 by the City of Savannah, 1/3 by the county government, and the last third is appointed by the CETA board itself. Would you support changing the CETA charter so that the last 1/3 of board appointments might be dedicated to other municipalities in Chatham County, like Garden City, Pooler, Port Wentworth, and the like?
I do think that we need to bring more players to the table. Pooler has probably grown tremendously in comparison to when the that whole board was founded and everything like that. Garden City is on the cusp, right behind Pooler. Port Wentworth is getting some size in it. I do think that it's a board that allows himself to appoint new board members is not always inclusive to what we need to be bringing as far as latitude is concerned. So if it's not them, another entity should be appointing those members. I don't think it should be self-appointed, because what you do is you stack the board, you stack the deck. And then if you stack the deck, the city and the county really won't have much latitude to say. So I think it's something based on how long that charter has existed. I think it's something we do really need to look at. But I think that's something we probably have to look at on the state level as far as the state reps and state senate is concerned, or the state delegation.
It's possible. I think you may be correct about the charter change for sure about that. Commissioner Ellis, the same question. The current board of CETA is appointed 1/3 by the city, 1/3 by the county, but the last third is appointed by the board itself. Would you support changing the CETA charter so that that last third might be able to be appointed by some of the other underrepresented municipalities in the county?
Let me say it this way, Chuck. I support a change in the charter, all right? But here's how I support changing the charter. We just don't have one municipality in Chatham County. We have 8. There should be representation from every municipality on the CETA board, because watch, CETA just doesn't bring business into the city of Savannah or the unincorporated Chatham County, but they bring business throughout the county. All right. When you mention the growth in Pooler, and yet Pooler is not at the table as having an appointee. See, so I would support changing the structure by which we appoint, but I would also have all municipalities, because remember now, we're just one Chatham. And so why not have representation from everybody so that they get to make an appointments to the board? So that's the structural change that I see that we need.
Thank you, Commissioner Ellis. Before I send it to you, John, for a question about the Port of Savannah, I want to stop and make a note to all candidates who are running for the state legislature in Chatham County this year. This question has been asked of, at this point, 17 or 16 candidates running for the Chatham County Commission, and there is almost a universality in the answers about the structure of the charter for the Savannah Economic Development Authority. So I hope that any candidates running for the state legislature will take note of the very broad support from Chatham County Commission candidates to amend that board's charter to make it more reflective. John, I want to pass it back to you. We have about 8 or 10 minutes left of questioning before we need to end this broadcast. So I want to talk about the port and maybe fit one more question. John?
Okay, thank you. The Port of Savannah accounts for an estimated $30 billion of economic impact to our state and our region, and a lot of jobs, and many of those are good paying jobs. But the port does not help the counties or municipalities offset the costs resultant from congestion, wear and tear on our roads, or pollution caused by port activities, trucking and shipping. Would you support negotiating through the state delegation to ensure that some form of direct revenue payments start flowing to the county and the municipalities from the profitability of the port? And let me remind you that up until 1996, every container that transited through the port, the county received $1.50 per container. And that funding was shared with Garden City and Port Wentworth. So here we are, 30 years later, port wants to double its size. All that profitability and economic enthusiasm going out of that port. Are we wrong to expect some compensation for the activity and the growth in the port? Anybody want to go first? Jay?
Let me say, John, one of the things I found out by working with the port and working with the school system, all right, was that nobody brought to the table to the port about the port being in partnership with the school board or having a mentoring program. And I want to preference that by, I don't know when we decided not to stop taking that container fee, all right, the 150 or whatever it was. I don't know when that happened, but I say this, in dealing with the Ports Authority and the past CEO and the present CEO, one of the things I found out about them and the municipalities and the county goes back to a biblical verse: you have not because you ask not. All right. Have we gone to them and sat to the table and asked them, here is what's going on? Now, the new chairman coming in January of 2021 will have that opportunity, because look at the virus and where it's putting us, to go to the Ports Authority and sit down with the legislators as well. See, you just can't isolate the Ports Authority. You've got to include what? The legislative branch of what they're doing, all right? Let's sit down at the table, propose to them the needs of Chatham County, and say to them, here are some ways that you can help us, all right? All right. And see what they say, all right? But if you have never asked them or never have been to the table to present to them needs that Chatham County may need, and the port is booming, okay? I mean, it's booming. But have we sat at the table with them and said to them, these are some needs that we have in Garden City and Port Wentworth and Bloomingdale and Savannah and Tybee and Vernonburg and Thunderbolt. Here are some ways that you can help us to meet these needs. I see that as a challenge for me as I become the chairman, to sit down and have that conversation and then ask, how can you be a better neighbor? Be a good neighbor. And like a good neighbor, you got to care about what happens in Chatham County.
Thank you, Chester. Commissioner Ellis, that was...
it's all right to call me Chester.
Okay, thank you. That was spot on. And if you don't ask, you don't get. Right. And a good neighbor is a good neighbor. So thank you for that answer. Commissioner Jones, Zeta, I'm sorry, Port.
I'm going to echo his sentiment. I'm going to agree with him. That's something we have not done in the past. I wish it would have never, in 1996, when I was a junior in college, right, we never let it go. Because when I learned a long time ago, my dad told me a long time ago, when you let it go, don't always expect it to come back. And so I echo the sentiments and I agree wholeheartedly. But I also understand that this is a state function and we have to have state conversations. And part of that state conversation is making sure we have the right state delegation locally, that we can have those conversations, that understand that their municipalities that they serve along with Chatham County need that much needed revenue, whether it's $1, $2, or $10. And we need to understand that locally that can be provided, and that's easy segue money, because it's not money that's coming out of their pocket. It's money coming from those entities who's bringing freight into our community and allowing us to put $10 on top of those units. And they always sell us the dream about we've increased from 2.6 million ton, 2.6 to 4.6 now. And in 2030, they told us 11.7, something like that. So we already understand the growth is going to be there. And they share that growth with us all the time when we go to CETA and we go to Chamber of Commerce meetings. So it's not like it's public, it's not public information, because it's 1,000 people in that room. It's 1,000 people in the room when they're talking about this. So understanding that these cities and municipalities within this confine could benefit from it, I don't see why we don't go and have that conversation with the Port Authority, have that conversation unilaterally speaking, the county and the 8 municipalities, as Commissioner Ellis spoke of, and have that conversation with our 8 state delegates and make sure we make that thing happen.
Now is the time.
But we also have to have a surplus plan in 2 years. If our state delegation doesn't fall through, I don't care who it is, we make sure we replace those state delegation people with people who are going to look out for all people.
Absolutely.
So
that's a great response. That's good.
Because we can just talk about having that conversation with state delegation people, and I'm sure there's conversation been had with some of the state delegation people. They just been reluctant because we make the excuse that we didn't have that conversation in public. Now, guess what, John? Guess what, Chuck? This conversation just became public.
Sure.
So all those people who are running for state delegation right now, they get to see this conversation is public, and it's on them to make sure we go in 2020. And when we have these conversations, we move the narrative. Or guess what, Chuck? We'll move the narrative in 2020 when we replace those people who don't want to move the narrative for us.
Very good.
Good. Thank you. Gentlemen, I want to stop and I want to thank both of you. This video has been viewed by almost 3,000 people on Facebook in the last 2 hours. To commit and sit down for a 2-hour debate is very laudable for both of you. These are not easy questions. I'm seeing several comments saying this is the best civics lesson that I've gotten since high school, and we really want to commend both of you. This will be our final question, and then we will move to allow Commissioner Jones to close out first, and then Commissioner Ellis to round out his closing. Our final question is going to be about revenues and new revenues. All right, as we stated earlier, 80% of Chatham County's budget comes from property taxes. If you talk to Chairman Terry Tolbert of the Assessors Board, he will tell you there is big trouble ahead for that tax digest. Knowing that you'll be serving a 4-year term through the budgets, we want to know if you'll consider the following revenue source. Since 1990, many counties and cities have implemented impact fees on new construction. Would you support impact fees on new construction in unincorporated Chatham County? For some background for you both, last year Chatham County issued over 2,000 building permits. If the average project was 3,000 square feet, that would be 6 million square feet. If the average impact fee was just $2.75 per square foot, that would have been 16.5 million in new revenue. So I want to give that question first to you, Commissioner Jones, and then I'll bring it to you, Commissioner Ellis.
I have had my conversation, Chuck, me and you probably over the last 2 or 3 years have had backwards dialogue about this piece right here. I have watched Effingham County, I might get them mixed up, but Effingham and Bryan County, I think one of them did it in 2004 and they tried to amend it again in 2007, and it kind of got some conversation pieces on it. And Bryan County did it in 2019. I do remember it now. I think it's something that they just recently have really been pushing about doing this, and it's a good way of generating revenue. I know the builders are going to be very upset about this conversation, but I think what it would do is it would give us much needed revenue in our community. And so I would be more than willing to put it to a vote, have a healthy discussion amongst those people along with me at the county commission, because I would want to make sure we have dialogue about it, but I am more than willing to bring the conversation up. Thank you. Do a unilateral decision, I'll be for it, but I would want the whole county commission to make that decision.
Thank you for the quick response. I know that we're running just a tad over time here. We're going to get to closing thoughts in just a moment. But Commissioner Ellis, I want to bring the same question to you with another background piece of, if you look at the southwest area of Chatham County, there is some 3,000 to 4,000 single family homes that could be built over the next 5 to 10 years. There's going to be a lot of service delivery requirements because of that. Would you support impact fees on new construction as a revenue source coming out of this recession?
Chuck, I have not made a firm commitment one way or the other. And the reason being that as I study impact fees, I see the pros and the cons. All right. Some of my fellow commissioners who come out of Texas talked about how they applied impact fees to people who were building new homes in their growing area, in their fast growing area. And what wound up happening to them was people just moved right across the border, all right, just right outside the county, but they were working in the county, all right. In the same vein, when I had the conversation with Ray Ellis, who is out of California, and in fact, Santa Barbara to be exact, he talked about the positive sides of how it was affecting them. And so when I talk to people here, all right, one of the things that I found out, and I'm not talking about just the everyday person on the street. I'm talking about some bankers and some lawyers and some professional people. When we talked about impact fees, they didn't understand it and didn't know it. And so with me, the jury is still out, all right?
Okay.
I am one who have to have information because I believe information is knowledge and knowledge is power. And so if I have the knowledge, and just because others are doing it, how does that fit in Chatham County? And so I'm still at the point where I'm collecting information so that I can make an intelligent decision when that time comes.
Great.
Thank you so much for that answer, Commissioner Ellis, Chester, Jay, Commissioner Jones. Thank you both again for sitting down for this event. It takes a lot of courage to sit down for 2 hours and answer these tough type of questions. And I think that Chatham County is better for both of you having done so. We're going to start our closings now. We're going to do the reverse order that we opened with. So we're going to start with Commissioner Jones. Please give us your closing. Take 2 or 3 minutes here. Make sure to tell people how to find you on social media and online and connect with your campaign. And then we'll go back to Commissioner Ellis.
All right, thank you. Once again, I thank Better Savannah, John McMasters for putting this together, Chuck Fagan for putting this together. I appreciate y'all being a great moderating team. To my counterpart, Chester Ellis, I appreciate his leadership, his help, and his support on the county commission as far as that piece is concerned. And I hope we have a good, clean race that we've had thus far, and we continue to do that. My campaign, when I started to run for this office, was simple as ABC. I wanted to make it simple because what I realized in our community is we make things complex and we don't make it transparent, and it goes over most people's head. So therefore, I came up with a quick, simple phrase, simple as ABC. A1 Chatham County Services, and that means let's make sure we look at these ordinances. Let's look into affordable housing. Let's look into these impact fees. Let's into all the services that we provide here in Chatham County. Let's look at the mini codes. Let's look at all these things we talked about in Chatham County, and let's see what we can do to bring it forward. COVID-19 was not an accident. It happened for a reason. It's a wake-up call for us here in America that we need to move forward and we need to change the way we're thinking. What worked in the past doesn't always work in the future. So that was A1 Chatham County Services. The second piece was business sense for all. Business sense for everybody says, hey, we all need to come to the table. If we really want to eliminate poverty, we want to get housing, we want to take care of crime, what we have to do is we have to create business opportunities, and not just business as far as entrepreneurship is concerned, public-private partnerships, making sure that we as government are giving those people the opportunity to get in construction, get into those things. Because if we do that and we start creating builders and entrepreneurs and servants in our community, that's how we get out of poverty. We can't get out of it any other way unless we start looking at the least of these and finding ways to wrap around service for them and making them vulnerable, a valuable resource and not vulnerable deterrents in our community. And the last component is community inclusion. Community conclusion, and what that says is when I go outside and all these other municipalities, we got to bring them into our house. We just got to stop talking about Chatham County and Savannah, Georgia. There are 8 communities in our community. And we got to make sure that every community is taken care of. And when we say that, we also got to stop being afraid to talk about race. Race is an issue in our problem, and race is a big problem in our community. And when we stop talking about racism and make race and put it on the table and say what it is, and start looking at each other as brothers and sisters and pull each other by the bootstraps and move our narrative forward, community inclusion is the only way we're gonna get out. So simple as ABC. I couldn't do it any easier. I tried to do it in 2 or 3 minutes. I went over my time by 15 seconds, but I appreciate y'all once again for putting this platform together. And the audience out there, we appreciate all those people who want to hear our conversation. And vote for Jay Jones. And you can see me at jforchatham@gmail.com. And my phone number is public, 912-547-7120. And my personal number is 912-228-2205. I'm not afraid to give either one of them. Call me, leave a message, text message, whatever case may be, and I'll be there to hear you got to say. Thank you again, Chuck. Thank you again, John.
Thank you, Commissioner Jones. Jay, I really appreciate it. Chester, please take 3.5 minutes or so here to close out our debate for your final thoughts. Make sure people know how to get in touch with you and find you on the internet.
Thank you so much. Let me thank you and John and for having this today and for inviting me to be a part. First of all, before I get into my closing, let me make 2 announcements. I have been working with the SEMA, the Chatham Emergency Management. I've been working with the National Guard and the Department of Health. And we have established that 2 testing places that will come up real soon that we have added. And that's June 1, we will be at Savannah High School between 9:30 and 1 o'clock for testing. Anyone that's drive up and be tested. And then on July 1, we will be here in historic Carver Village at the Neighborhood Center. Let me say to people, in order for Chatham County to get healthy, we have to be tested, all right? We need to know that testing is alive and well and that it helps us to be alive and well. Secondly, let me thank you for inviting me and giving me this opportunity. My key platform are economic development, health care and disaster preparation, education and training, public safety. As chairman, I will make sure that the essential services for our citizens are provided while maintaining a balanced budget and increasing revenue stream. Now is the time for proven leadership. On day 1, I'm ready to get the job done. The citizens of Chatham County is my business. The citizens of Chatham County are my business. We will work together as a cohesive team to get the job done. I want to move Chatham County to our next level with transparency, accountability, and strong leadership. Together, I believe we can and we will move Chatham County forward. Let me say, if you want to get in touch with me, go to Chester, the number 4 for Chatham.com. That's Chester4Chatham.com, and it's the number 4. And you can get with me on there. You will find my phone number, which is 912-257-2394. And I gave you my cell phone number because a lot of times I'm not at this house. You would have to leave a message for me. Remember, with Chester for Chatham, and you voting for Chester for Chatham, Chatham is strong. COVID may be strong, but we are stronger. Let's do this thing together. Thank you, and I appreciate your attention.
Thank you. Thank you again to you both for doing this. I really, really appreciate it. I want to make just a few housekeeping notes for the page before I let John give some closing thoughts on the importance of this race. Next Saturday will be our final, I think our final editions for the spring, summer primaries now, it seems. We will have 2 of the 3 candidates running for the tax commissioner's office at 1:30 p.m. next Saturday. That is May 23rd. And then at 5:30 p.m., we will be interviewing solo what many feel will be one of U2's likely competitor in the fall. Former Kybee Island Mayor Jason Bolterman will sit down with us for a solo interview because his primary opponent declined to participate. So again, I just want to thank both of you from the bottom of my heart for agreeing to participate in this, for putting on such an amazing show of your knowledge and your leadership for this critical position. John, give us a few closing thoughts here, and then I'll take us out of the broadcast.
Well, thank you, Chuck. And I really have to hand it to both of our Democratic chairman candidates. You guys are on top of a lot of the issues and the policies that Better Savannah firmly believes in, and we are very appreciative of that. And we hope to see more of that. I think in this crazy COVID environment where you all can't campaign normally, this medium and this sort of exchange with depth and patience and time is a great service to the voters. You have provided them with your time and your knowledge, and they thank you, and I thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you again, and thank you both again for participating. We're going to take ourselves out of the live broadcast here. And before I do, I just want to say thank you for watching this video live. Please share the stream to as many people and places as you think need to see this. And always stay safe, stay socially distant, and listen to the science. Have a great night, Savannah. We'll see you next week.
Thank you.